All right, back live tonight here on In Focus, and thanks for staying on. Statistics South Africa has painted a bleak picture for over 1,600 or so companies that have decided to voluntarily hang their heads this year. Data suggests, though, that financing, insurance, real estate and business services were the worst affected. Let's discuss these numbers with the South African Federation of Trade Unions, Zwelinzima, Vavi. Tata, good to have you, and thank you very much for your time.
Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year. Well, we hope it will be a Happy New Year.
I hope so.
Good start to it. A total number of companies, 1,600, being liquidated this time around. A significant decline if you look at the numbers at the same time in 2022, 13.1%. So 1,091 companies would have been liquidated in 2022. This time around, 921. 816 closed corporations. This would have been liquidated in 2022. This time around, 736. So they say these numbers are a pulse of the economy, but they also give us a picture of outstanding debt. What does this tell us about the nation's economic health?
Well, I just want to comment on your 13% decline from the previous last quarter of 2022 in terms of liquidations. The context is very important there, because in December 2022 or throughout that year, we were still dealing with that massive crisis of COVID-19. And which devastated many companies, in particular small, medium, macro enterprises. So when there's a decline of 13% throughout the year of 2023, that's not something big to talk about, because we must always remember the correlation between what we're talking about, 1,657 businesses that have been forced to shut down voluntarily in the majority, but also being forced to liquidate in the minority of the cases. Talk to also the other crisis of South Africa. And here's the crisis. Those numbers speak to the numbers of workers that are losing their jobs. And that's why we are talking again about the job loss bloodbath in the economy. The second thing that should worry us is that those are the jobs of the what we call more secured, more decent pension, providing housing allowances, transport allowances. It is those jobs that are disappearing. You combine with the fact that our manufacturing sector in the overall continues to decline. In 1994, our manufacturing sector was contributing 22% to the GDP. It's now down to 12%.
Sure.
And so when you talk about company closures, liquidations, you are also talking about the attack on the decent living standards of South Africans and workers in general. So that goes together. Then before you know it, you will be listening to a government patting itself on the back saying we are doing well, when actually they are creating jobs in what we call precarious sectors, in what we call informal sectors, which doesn't offer any job security, offers no real benefits to workers, such as provident fund, medical aid, transport or housing allowances. Overall, the picture will be that workers are suffering. The standards of living is going down. They have become the face of unemployment, of poverty, and so that's unfortunate.
So let's talk about that. We look at the number of those who are liquidating voluntarily and those who are, of course, being forced. And they look at that and they say, well, it appears that it suggests that businesses are now taking a calculated decision to shut down, suggesting that they are now, I suppose, a little bit more mature at handling the economic challenges than merely just digging their heads in and avoiding the risks.
Doing nothing when you are facing a slow death is irresponsible in the context. You have to do something, and I think most of the South African business are learning to rather raise their hands to say, please put me under business rescue, and or please just liquidate me. I can't cope. I can see what will happen to me 6 months, 1 or 12 months down the line.
Yeah.
I better voluntarily hang myself instead of waiting for the hangman.
I was about to say, part of what leads to that is the pressure of the labor cost.
No, not at all. Let me tell you what I think is driving, or what SAFTU think is driving this crisis. The biggest is what we have come here for so many years, to say, overall, South Africa is pursuing a pro-rich growth path, a Washington consensus-inspired policy proposition, a rating agency, World Bank, IMF, policy-inspired propositions. And this proposition says one of the instrument that we must show as a good boy is that we must have a very low inflation. And South Africa have said that its inflation rate must sit in a band of between 3 and 6%.
Yeah.
And the only way to do that is to use the blunt instrument of interest rates. Last year in November, we issued a statement as SAFTU to say, how could the Reserve Bank not realize that keeping the interest rates unchanged at a time when the crisis of unemployment, poverty, inequality was as well pronounced as any other time? It is irresponsible, because they have said so. The Reserve Bank governor says we are following restrictive monetary policies. Restrictive monetary policies means we will deliberately
restrict you from spending money.
Restrict you from borrowing money, from spending money, and when you don't have it, and I'm not saying that spending money when you don't have it is responsible, but we are taking steps to cool down the economy. When you cool down the economy...
In essence, what you're saying is that these businesses then can't afford actually to go borrow to keep opening their doors in that environment.
If the repurchase rate is sitting at 8.25%, and if the prime borrowing rate is sitting at 11.75%, how many of us, the marginalized, middle strata, the working class, the underemployed, the pauper class, can afford to spend or to borrow anything? Who can afford to buy food in the same way that you used to, when you have to pay 11.75% for the installment of your car, your bond, and anything that you buy on purchase? So that's why the Reserve Bank also issued another report, which is very important. They call that report the Household Final Consumption Expenditure Report, which says actually South Africans are spending lesser and lesser on clothing, food, furniture, and recreation. When you do not eat the same and you don't consume the same, and when you're now cutting your clothing expenditures, it means overall your standards of living are going down. And without you realizing that, you're actually getting more poor and poorer. But the interest rate at 11.75% is absolutely music in the ears of the guys who are multi-billionaires, multi-millionaires, who can afford to put their money in the banks and earn hallelujah profit without doing anything.
Against that theory, because financing, insurance, real estate, business service sectors, those are the ones that remain volatile, showing more liquidations.
Because those are startup businesses. The real sharks that are manipulating the currency are smiling as they see the small black businesses that were getting into the financial services collapsing and being liquidated left, right, and center. The big guys are saying, well, come to our direction. We can find a way of managing your debt. By the way, the debt levels among South Africans is something that even the Statistics South Africa says is at sustainable levels. We are in debt. All of us, I'm sure, sitting there, you can't wait for the end of the month so that you can borrow from people to pay John that you borrowed money from at the beginning of the month. We are in crisis, I mean, in the overall, when it comes to the policy. It goes back to the point, no country sitting with 41, 42% of unemployment, no country sitting with 66% rate of unemployment amongst its young people, or sometimes up to 76% when it comes to youth below the age of 25 but above the age of 25, can continue to employ these pro-rich Washington suitable policies, but definitely not suitable for a country with such massive backlogs when it comes to development.
We might not be buying clothes and nicer food, maybe not eating steak anymore, maybe eating wings and drumsticks, but we are seemingly buying electricity, buying gas, and buying a lot of water, because those industries are the least affected, with only 3 liquidations over the year.
Which is the second point. The second point is that we have a crisis of electricity that we have not solved for the past 15, 16 years now. So it's no surprise that anyone who will be venturing as a business into selling, generating electricity is making money at this point. Now imagine if you are in Durban and you know after the April 2022 rain bombs, that killed about 500 people and messed up the infrastructure, leading to even the beaches being closed down because of the E. coli, the disease that affect people in our beaches. What happens there? Who have confidence to go and buy or to rely on the tap water? People then go and buy the bottled water. And so the bottled water industry shoots up because it is benefiting from the ecological crisis, but also it is benefiting from the neglect of our infrastructure by our defunded and local governments who are facing their own squeeze, declining tax base as a result of so many liquidation, and secondly, mismanagement, corruption, but then declining transfers from the national government, because our national government is pursuing yet another anti-poor, anti-development policy called austerity, meaning that they are cutting budgets across the board, whether it is transfers to the local government, health, education, security, correctional services, everything is facing the hammer. So when we hear the Minister of Finance in February speaking and about budget cuts and austerity, or what they call fiscal consolidation, it means that more people are going to be pushed into unemployment, into a life of hopelessness.
At the same time, we are paying more for electricity, with the Minister of Public Enterprises having put on the table of Parliament now the NERSA hikes of 18.65%. I know you were one of the unions, of course, that would want to challenge that.
We have seen over 700% increase in the price of electricity throughout the crisis that have now lasted for 15, 16 years. Not sustainable. I mean, to just tell people with a straight face it's going to be 18% in addition to another 19% of last year, another 17, 18% of the previous year, it's crazy. It's crazy. And that's why people are saying that perhaps is government really not having a capacity to solve a crisis for 15, 16 years running?
Yeah.
Or should we not look at perhaps the other nefarious agendas as to why people would rather sustain a crisis in order to make some individuals super rich who are selling that oil to Eskom? We have not found out the real answers as to why a government that calls itself a people-centered government and which knows the devastating impact the shortages of electricity will mean to the economy as a whole, but will do very little, or absolutely very little, to talk about. For so long, and they're sitting on a crisis. And this is why I normally call that, to say neoliberalism drives people crazy. You don't see that you are drowning. The ANC is in such a political crisis come April, May elections. But it won't give up on what Washington is telling them to do, despite the fact that they know they have lost the Western Cape, they have lost the Nelson Mandela Metro, the Johannesburg Metro, Ekurhuleni, Pretoria, Tshwane. They are losing all of the metros because the working class, which is sitting on the front row of the fire of the closing of the and liquidation of firms, is turning their backs away from the ruling party. They don't realize that, gosh, we've got to change this road we are traveling down. No. As long as the rating agencies continue to say, good boy, you are doing very, very well in squeezing life out of the poor that you promised a better life in 1994.
Liquidation, though, one would say, if you look at them at a global landscape, the orientation is such that there's a decline. I mean, if you look at Brazil, if you look at India, if you look at Nigeria, if you look at Indonesia, that's the data supporting that perspective, suggesting that worldwide there is some kind of economic improvement.
China have grown by 5%. We are stuck between this quarter, we are growing by 1.1%. The next quarter, 0.something%. The next quarter, we are in recession. And let's repeat what we have been saying. As long as we are refusing to learn from the past 30 years of pro-business, neoliberal economic programs, we will continue to be trapped in a situation we find ourselves in. Liquidations, factory closures, job losses, unemployment being, we're competing. At some point, we have been holding the position number 1 in terms of the country with worst unemployment rate. I see now that Djibouti have overtaken us. But in terms of inequalities, we are number 1. When it comes to youth unemployment, we may have been displaced recently by 1 or 2 countries. But our African or black youth remain the face of unemployment. Our black women remain the face of those inequalities, unemployment and inequalities. Our guys are refusing. The evidence is overwhelming. But they continue to tell the January 8 that, look, and this is how they mislead our people. Look, guys, we're not doing very bad. That's what President Ramaphosa was saying in Bombela. In
I want to talk a little bit more about it. Let's take a break. We'll come back and wrap up the conversation. South African Federation of Trade Unions, Zwelinzima, Vavi, with us this evening. You were touching on manifestos, and we're going to be hearing a lot of them in the next coming few weeks. There seemingly is no organization right now, politically, that is presenting the electorate with solutions to deal with these issues.
So far, I've not heard anything, honestly. I was just to conclude the point I was making, how the comrades are now rather engaging in what you will call intellectual dishonesty, instead of confronting the deepening and worsening crisis that they are facing. The president of the ANC says, look, guys, we're doing well. In 1994, we had only 8 million people in employment in the economy. We have now 16.7 million. Look, this is a tremendous progress. And unfortunately, other comrades, they say, that's 8 million more jobs between 1994 and to date. But what the president is not going to tell them is that in 1994, the population was sitting at around 40-45%. I can't remember the exact figure. It's now 62 million. Sorry, it was 40-45 million. It's now 62 million, meaning that there has been a growth of 20 more South Africans. So 20 million more South Africans. Now, when you aggregate They are 16.7. They know that Statistics South Africa says they expanded, when using the expanded definition of unemployment, we are sitting at 41, 42%. All of the recent improvements are so minor, and they have absolutely making no sense to the youth and women that are the face of that unemployment.
Including the job creation schemes of government?
Absolutely. Oh, no, we have 1.2 million people in the job schemes of government. And basically that's informal jobs that they are created, same like the fiasco that is unfolding in Gauteng. We're solving the crisis of security. We have Amapanyaza and whatever they call them in the streets. But Ketlas Tole, before he left, he has told us that he is in need of 60,000 more police officials to fight crime in the streets. We have 74 people dying every day. And the ability of the police to identify the people who are committing murder have declined by half between 2012 and 2022. Surely, when you mislead people and say that things are going to improve by just lying to them and now doing the what you can call the smart footworks, you're not solving the problem. The crisis we have with the ANC is that it is refusing to learn even when it is facing a defeat in the elections, but it is refusing to let go of inappropriate policies that are leading to this 1,657 firms or factories or workplaces closing down, sending more people to join that long queue of 11.7 million people who are unemployed in the country, with an 8.4 million of the young people who are not in any employment, education, or training. We are in a disaster.
In the meantime,
we are in a disaster. We call this a precipice.
The Minister of Labour and Employment says on Wednesday and Thursday he will be in the Free State somewhere launching a program for job seekers with potential employers, showcasing career opportunities, offering registration services, and so on. And so forth. I mean, are these efforts meeting that need that we have for you?
Yeah, the Free State is a disaster. Have you been to Welcome recently, or Virginia, or any of the former big mining company towns? It's a total wasteland. We have allowed a situation where these multinational companies come into South Africa to mine, to dig our minerals, and to send them to their mother countries, and increasingly now to China, India. Raw, not beneficiated, not creating secondary industries in South Africa, and therefore we have been exporting jobs to China, India, and other European countries for the past 20 years since these guys discovered this is diamond.
This is not a new conversation, though.
It is not. It is a shame that in 30 years of democracy.
Why is the issue of beneficiation, for example, still being debated like we're debating it now? Are people not seeing the value of that? Because I thought this was a debate that we all have agreed on, that this needs to happen.
Way back before 1992, we had a MAG report. A MAG report was something that was actually created as a research institution to look at the future by the ANC, that spoke about all of these pro-poor, progressive economic programs. And one of them, at the center of it, was that we must be able to use both our land and our minerals better than the apartheid regime have been using it. Because this extraction and this in South Africa as the point of extraction started with the colonial era. We've not changed that direction of us being a neo-colonial economy whose main activity is extraction of the minerals and sending them raw overseas. Now, it is all of those things combining, leading to the statistic I gave you that says we have lost half of our manufacturing capacity in the past 30 years, meaning that we have lost most of the jobs that were paying workers a better wage, offering them a better job security. We are now creating the jobs, the type of jobs that Minister of Labour and Employment, you must change that name, by the way, to something else, that is going to be launching in the Free State to give workers there another false solution, to promise them that something big is coming, when we know that they will be ending up in some informalization and therefore precarious type of jobs that does not address their levels of poverty inequality.
Dr. Vavi, let's leave it there. Much appreciated. Thanks for coming on and being a part of the conversation tonight. And In Focus continues for you in a moment. Stay with us.